All right, so welcome committee members, liaisons, and members of the public to the Partnership Grants Committee meeting. Thank you for joining us. We will begin. So we are using Zoom with the goal to foster a more inclusive environment and effective meeting. If you'd like to comment during the meeting, please type "I have a comment" or "I have a question" in the chat, and a message will be sent to the host. Alternatively, you can also use the raise hand feature. In efforts of transparency for all those joining the public meeting, whether by Zoom or phone, we request that you refrain from having side conversations on chat about the content of the meeting. Again, the chat feature is utilized simply as a tool for you to virtually indicate that you'd like to speak in order to help the chair facilitate the discussion. Going forward, all Legal Service Trust Fund Commission and committee meetings will be recorded and posted to the State Bar website. A friendly reminder that this is a video conference, and please be aware of your surroundings behind you. A few troubleshooting tips. For those using Zoom on a computer, when on mute, holding down the spacebar will temporarily unmute you. If you use your phone to dial into this meeting, please be sure to use your computer's microphone is on to avoid audio feedback issues. And while joining audio via computer is highly recommended, if an individual loses audio, you can call in separately using the Zoom conference number.
Okay, is that it, Crystal? Thank you. Is anybody else in the waiting room? No? All right, well, we have quorum, barely, so let's do, why don't we just do a roll call?
Sure. Eric Eskin?
Here.
Will Bashelli?
Good morning, and I'm here.
Hey, Will.
Jason Galkin?
Here.
Morning, here.
Deanna Cruz? Joseph Lee? Christina Venarelli?
Here.
And I'll go to our advisors, Judge Jaskol, Justice Murray.
Crystal, sorry to
Yes.
interrupt. There is a 323 number that's dialed in. I wonder if that might be
Judge Jaskol, I think.
So I'm gonna allow that number to talk, and if it's Judge Jaskol, if you could identify yourself.
You need to unmute yourself. You're 323 person.
Maybe she doesn't know how on her phone. Can one of you do it?
Can we do it?
You have to hit *6 on your phone, I believe, to unmute the Zoom to our caller.
Yeah, I don't think we're able to.
Yeah, we're not. Okay.
She'll probably email. That's what I remember this happening once before, and she ended up emailing.
Okay.
Yes, so keep your eye on the email. Are we okay proceeding without knowing who this person is?
Yes.
Okay, so let's see, we were in the middle of what, identifying staff or something? Where were we on that?
Yeah, the liaisons, Selena Copeland, Bonnie Huff. Yeah. Okay. Christine Ganell. Mark Tony. All right, and then State Bar staff, Elizabeth Hom.
Present.
Michael Chang.
Present.
All right, so we have quorum.
And do we have any members of the public here other than the unknown 323 person? Possibly. Okay. All right, well, so I'm Eric Iskin. I'm the chair of this committee, and welcome everybody. We have two new, I actually have three new members of the committee. One of them is here. Jason, you introduced yourself briefly at one of the commission meetings, but why don't you just say a few words about yourself and just a short introduction.
Sure, thanks. I'm Jason Galkin. I'm the court executive officer in Nevada County. I've been with the courts for about 9 years, including a short stint for 4 years in Orange County, where I did some time part-time in the self-help center as a self-help attorney. So I did my rounds closely associated with these kind of projects.
Which self-help center was it in Orange County?
I worked in North and Harbor Justice Centers.
I mean, was it unlawful detainer? Was it
I
family law?
I touched everything. So during my stint, I mean, it was only 2 days a week, so it was mostly a crash course, but I did dabble in all sorts of things.
Great. Well, welcome. That's wonderful. Okay, so do we have any members of the public? I'm not sure if we have anybody on, but do we have any public comment? Okay, hearing none, let's move on to the consent agenda. First, and the item on the agenda there is to approve the meeting summary and action items from our last meeting of July 29. Any discussion about that? If none, I will move that we approve those minutes in that action summary.
Second,
Great. So I'll take roll call vote for this. Iskin,
Yes.
Vishali,
Yes.
Galkin,
Abstain.
Cruz, Lee, Vanarelli.
yes.
All right, motion passes majority.
Very good. So let's move now into the action items. And the first of them is the 2021 grant budget revisions and carryover requests. And I believe that Chrisley, you've got a PowerPoint there to walk us through. So I'll turn it over to you.
So I'm going to be switching through a couple of screens. So I'll have this view instead of the full share screen, but let me know if I can zoom anything a little bit bigger. So for our budget revision requests, just providing some background regarding this process. So historically, the Partnership Grants Committee has not historically approved carryovers, except in instances when a project was not reapplying for funding. In light of the COVID-19 pandemic, the committee and the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission took a flexible approach towards all state grants and carryover requests for the 2020 grant year. So grantees who were approved carryovers, they were approved for a 12-month spend down period ending December 31st, 2021. Just a reminder of the approval process. If the budget revisions or carryover requests are under 10%, that's a self-executing approval and then approved administratively. A range of 10 to 25%, staff has the authority to approve those, and any requests over 25%, that would be up for the committee review for the commission to approve those recommendations. As far as the 2021 partnership grant budget revisions and carryover requests, the deadline to submit those requests for grantees was just last Friday, October 29th. And here's just a quick summary of what was received. We had 11 budget revisions received, 8 of which were requests below 25%, and then 3 requests were above 25%. As I mentioned earlier, those will be up for committee discussion for the recommendation.
Can I interrupt you? I'm sorry. I just got a text from Joe Lee who said he can't find the Zoom information for the call. Is that it's in the meeting invite, right?
Yes.
All right. I'll tell you what, I'm going to mute myself and you can just keep going. I'll give him a call and see if I can.
For what it's worth, I did not find mine in the meeting invite. I went to the public website, went through that Zoom link, and then was put on as a panelist that route. So.
Yeah, the email that went out, the link sent me to an Outlook login. So I
Can somebody send Joe the link?
Yeah, let me go ahead and do that right now. Let me see.
Sure. No, Crystal, I can do that. Why don't you?
Okay, thank you. Okay. All right. So just recapping in terms of the carryover requests, we received 8. So 8 carryover requests were received, 2 of which were below the 25%, and 6 requests were above the 25%. So I'm gonna share my screen again just to show you the carryovers and budget revisions that were under 25, and then we'll take a deeper dive into those other requests that are requiring committee action today. Sorry, let me scroll this up a little bit. So the top portion are the carryover requests. So just to let you know, we received requests from Elder Law and Advocacy and Family Violence Law Center. Their percentages were 10 and 13%. Again, that's within that staff approval range, just to let you know that we received them. And then in terms of budget revisions, we received quite a bit more, and a lot of them were in that range of 0%. It was $10, so the percentage ended up being 0 when you rounded up to the nearest whole number, and then to 20%, which were either self-executing or staff approved. And then I'm sharing again. So today we wanted to talk a little bit more about those requests that were over 25%. I'll go ahead and get started with Community Legal Aid SoCal for their Orange County Consumer Debt Workshop. So their grant amount for 2021 was $22,566. They're requesting a carryover amount of $9,000. Percentage-wise, it is 40%, which seems substantial. And then you'll see additional data points, such as if they were approved for 2020 carryover or had applied for one, and then their upcoming award for the 2022 grant year. So here's the explanation that CLA SoCal included in their request for this carryover amount. Given the amount and the fact that CLA SoCal had not requested a carryover last year, our staff recommendation for the committee's consideration is to approve. Any questions about this request?
I guess I'm not sure why we should approve it, but let's go through the other ones.
Okay, yeah, we'll go through them. We'll go through them individually, and it's up to the committee if you want to make like a batch type of recommendation or do individual recommendations as well. So the next thing you'll see here, we did receive substantial requests. So legal assistance for seniors, they are requesting 100% carryover, meaning that, projected, they had not spent any of their 2021 grant funds. As you can see, they were approved a $41,000 carryover last year, about a 70% carryover, and they will be receiving a $60,000 2022 award allocation. The explanations are pretty text heavy, so everyone could take a look and see if there's any questions. But generally, due to court closures and with pivoting this project during the grant year, this project just had a lot of they were negatively impacted, and trying to figure out how to navigate. So the staff recommendation, kind of considering the carryover requests and the upcoming grant award, as well as the fact that all current grantees will have an opportunity to apply for supplemental funding in 2022. Our staff recommendation is to not approve this request. Okay.
Can you zoom just a bit on that? I can't read any of it.
Is that okay, Will?
Yeah, thank you.
I did want to just clarify. I did reach out to the program organizations who received 2020 carryovers, just to check on like the status of them spending that money down. This project has occurred in 2021, and so they've been utilizing the 2020 carryover amounts for the 2021 grant year. So that's why it's 100% off of the grant award amounts.
Is there any reason staff didn't want to? Oh, I guess you already explained. Because they're going to have an opportunity to request supplemental funds, some portion didn't seem appropriate. Is that my understanding?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
Mostly just because there's an opportunity in the future, and then they do still have the 2020 carryover as well. So they wouldn't necessarily be negatively impacted in the upcoming grant year, because that's, if approved, carryovers would, there's a 6-month period moving forward, so it'd have to be spent down in December 2022. So having basically double the grant award amount, it was a little bit. So we have concerns about being the organization able to spend that large of a sum amount in the grant year.
And correct me if I'm wrong, it seems to me that they haven't even demonstrated in the request that their workload or projection for the upcoming fiscal year is going to be 2x what they had normally projected for their regular, right? So carrying over and then getting the subsequent award, they're just going to have carryover in the next year because they're not going to have 2 years worth of workload in 1 year to do, right? They're only going to have the one. So work wasn't done this year, or not a full amount of work was done this year. And that is kind of, by the wayside, it seems to me anyway.
Mm-hmm. And just to point out too, if the committee were to kind of go with staff's recommendation, the monies returned would go to a future grant pool 2023, or like a reserve. So we will, distribute it again in the future to other projects, or these organizations reapply. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to go through a couple more. You'll see very similar, like high grant award amounts. So Central California Legal Services, they have 2 projects in which they're seeking 100% carryover for both of those grants. They were approved pretty substantial carryovers in 2020. And then they're also expecting very similar 2022 grant award amounts for both of the projects. You can take a look here, but again, they had staffing issues in the 2021 year. And I think with the proposed carryover, they want to increase outreach efforts. Again, considering the history of the approved carryover and the fact that we have PG 2.0 as an available option, the staff recommendation is to not approve this request. Any questions? Yeah.
The only comment I might make on these, because they're landlord tenant and UD related, is in the context of suspension of UDs, right? That there may be a workload impact. I don't think it's 100%, right? Of what they call the floodgates opening of, at least on the court side, we've been contemplating it. I don't know if I haven't read the full description here. I don't know if they've contemplated increased workload relative to what they would normally project. But that might be something to consider in the context of this, that there's going to be more than usual in the coming year, most likely in the UD context.
I would say that they are getting a 2022 grant. They will have an opportunity. That's exactly the reason the legislature approved additional funding for partnership grants that we're going to be looking at later. So even if there is an increased workload, they will have an opportunity to apply for increased funding in 2022. By the way, I got a text from Lisa Jaskell. That is her, the 323 number. And I don't know whether Joe Lee has gotten the, did we send him the link? Because he's emailing.
I did send him the link, but I don't know if he's familiar with my name. So if you want to text him to look for an email from me, that would be helpful. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
And then we've allowed Judge Jaskell's phone number to participate. So when she feels called to, she may.
Thank you. Okay. So in relation to Central California Legal Services carryover request, they did also submit a budget revision request in line with their proposal for the carryover request, which is to hire a full-time outreach worker, as well as related travel expenses. So staff recommendation here is to defer to the committee, depending on how the committee feels about the carryover request. The committee, for example, could approve this budget revision, and then we will relay the decision to CCLS, and they may not want to move forward with the budget revision before commission approval. So yeah, so we're deferring to the committee as to how they want to vote or decide on this item.
Did they define what a full-time outreach worker does?
It's in relation to their carryover request here. So it's more so to try and get more self-represented litigants in the door. So it really depends. Like, the committee could be flexible and approve it, but if CCLS finds out, they wouldn't necessarily be approved for the carryover request, they have the option to not move forward or just kind of use their original proposed budget to carry out the grant year.
Seems like to the point Eric was making moments ago, that seems like something they would put in the context of their new request for more money,
Mhm.
you know, going forward, given the new availability of resources.
Okay, and I had two more, a few more as well. So neighborhood legal services, they're requesting carryover requests of about 85% of their total grant for 2022. So they did not apply for a carryover in 2020. I believe this was a new project, but they are receiving a $90,000 award for the 2022 grant year. I'll have the explanation here on it's very similar for both projects, but I think they were having staffing issues in terms of hiring a staff attorney to oversee both projects.
Well, this one to me looks more like they might use it. No?
Mhm. So they're requesting to include a full-time new attorney. Again, I mean, I think if we're talking using similar reasoning as CCLS, they can apply for PG 2.0. I think one other consideration is that the committee made the 2022 funding allocations given a certain proposed project. So adding new staff, for example, that might be more appropriate for PG 2.0 option 2. And they can kind of use that as that mechanism instead of kind of altering the project before it gets started. So that's just another point to consider.
Eric, I think you're muted.
Oh, I think he might be on the phone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm actually trying to talk Joe Lee through this. He went on the State Bar website, tried to click on the link there, and is getting like user account not recognized or something like that.
Did he receive my email?
Joe, he said he didn't receive a text from you.
No, an email. An email. I
Or
don't
an
have.
email.
Yeah.
Did you get an email from Elizabeth Hom?
I got an email from somebody. No, I got an email from emails from. Try logging into Zoom using the meeting ID number to connect to the meeting is what Kimberly is saying.
Can you just text him the meeting ID number?
Yeah. Do you have the meeting ID? He's got the meeting ID number. It's on the
Oh.
bar site. Try that. Otherwise, Joe, I don't know what to do.
Joe, I'm sorry, Eric. I'm sending you my phone number. If you could pass it along to Joe.
All right, I'm gonna
not
send.
in the public meeting.
Right.
That
I'm
would be
gonna
great.
email you Elizabeth's phone number separately offline, and you can just call her and she'll talk you through it.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Sorry about that, folks.
Eric, I just put it in the chat for you, my phone number. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Okay, and then I'll just talk briefly about NLS's other request for stabilizing families. Again, it's an 85% carryover, very like almost identical reasoning in terms of NLS being unable to staff their project in the 2021 grant year. So again, staff recommendation would be to not approve this request, but I'll also communicate the option of PG 2.0 as a way to supplement with their proposed plans to increase staffing for the project. On a related note, NLS also submitted a budget revision similar to CCLS, just assuming, I think they're in relation to the carryover request. So again, this is deferred to committee whether or not you'd like to just go with staff recommendation and not approve either both the carryover and the budget revision, or not approve the carryover and then approve the budget revision. So it's really, we defer to the committee as to what you think might be the best course of action.
Is this one the first NLS that you talked about or the second one?
The second one. So yeah.
It looks like many of these requests are, we weren't able to hire somebody and now we want to hire them for next year and have that pot of money?
Mhm.
Is that
I
a lot
read
of
the-
what this is?
I read the first NLS one like that, but the second one, they've already hired these people. That's what it looked like to me.
I think they were able to staff someone towards the end. I think who started November 1st, but like I mentioned, they are receiving $100,000 award
Yeah.
for 2022. So I don't think the carryover would necessarily bridge that gap because they do have monies coming in for beginning of next year.
Right, because they wouldn't have hired these people if they didn't have money to pay them. But the
Mhm.
one before, it looks like if we give them this money, they're going to hire more people. And if we don't, they can't, or they won't.
Mhm. Or they have PG 2.0 as well, just to make that proposal.
I understand.
Yeah.
You'll see later in the agenda, we do have substantial additional money that's been authorized for 2022 that these projects can apply for.
Yeah, so these were the budget revisions and the carryover requests for the committee's approval. Really deferring to the committee if you want to take the request individually or as a batch as to the staff recommendation for each of them.
I'm okay taking them as a batch. Does anybody want to consider them individually? Well, just to provoke the question, I'll move that we approve the staff's recommendations collectively with respect to
Eric-
revisions and carryovers.
Okay, I just wanted to ask, so we don't have staff recommendations for the budget revisions. Does the committee feel strongly about not approving them in line with the carryover request or approving them while giving the organization the flexibility to decide to not move it forward for commission approval? So I just want to call out, we don't have staff recommendations for the budget revisions.
Well, what would be the resolution that we would pass if we went down that road?
If it's the batch, we would just have I believe it's like the spreadsheet, and it would be either not approve or, sorry, can you ask your question again in terms of like the?
I'm
the
not
approval
following.
process?
Like if we want to agree with what the staff is proposing, well, let's see. I guess we could approve the staff's recommendation for carryovers.
Mhm.
And then separately deal with budget revision requests. That's one option. I don't know if anybody, how people feel about that, unless you think they're tied at the hip. But let me do this. I will move that we approve the staff's recommendations with respect to carryover requests.
Can I just see the first one again, please, before we vote?
Mhm.
Or, because wasn't,
Oh, no, the first one was the 9,000.
Oh, sorry.
okay, I'm good.
And none of these organizations are present to speak in defense of their request, right?
No, they were all communicated beforehand and informed of the staff, what the staff recommendation will be, and offered the opportunity to attend. So they were given notice
Okay,
as well. So
thank you.
and
Seconded.
they're all aware of PG 2.0 as well, and I believe they're all looking forward to applying if that kind of eases anyone's mind. Yeah. Okay, so Will, you seconded?
Yes.
All right. So I'll go ahead and do the roll call. Iskin,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Galkin,
Yes.
Cruz, Lee, Vanelli.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes unanimous. All right, so that's regarding the carryovers. And then in regards to the budget revisions.
Looks like Joseph Lee is here.
I can promote him.
So for the budget revisions, going back to that discussion, I know those were still deferred to committee. Does the committee feel strongly about not approving the three requests or approving them? And then we'll communicate with the grantees. Well, we'll communicate with the grantees regardless. So
You don't have a recommendation?
I'm in terms of like the initial staff thought is if the committee does approve it, there is that flexibility for the organization to say it's okay, we won't be pursuing this. But it also does make sense if you say no, just because it's also a no for the carryover request. So I don't know if we had a strong feeling. Yeah.
There's no harm, right, in approving it?
No.
Okay, I'm fine approving them.
Hi, Joe, welcome.
Yeah, I am so sorry. I had a series of technical issues in the, I tried about 8 different ways to get in. I went to the State Bar website and I clicked on the link and it took me into a different meeting.
Oh.
Eric's my witness that I clicked the link for this meeting.
Maybe that was a better meeting than this one. I don't know.
You know, I don't know, but I thought if I don't recognize anybody there, I think that's
Joe,
probably not good.
why don't you briefly introduce yourself? I think this
Okay, well, I'm Joe Lee, and believe it or not, I'm the former chair of my law firm's IT committee. But it has not been in evidence today. I'm a partner at the Munger, Tolles & Olson firm. I'm also, I've had a fair amount of experience with these grants or the grant process on the other side, as I've mentioned before, because I'm the board president at the Disability Rights Legal Center. So I've been through an audit and I've been through the annual application process. So it's nice to be joining the whole grant world from the other side. So, and I'm very sorry to be late.
Great, welcome, Joe. All right, well, Joe, we were in the middle of a motion and approval process that you have not participated in, so you'll be confused, but let's finish that and we'll move on to something that you'll be able to follow. So where are we now, Crystal?
The budget revisions. I think Will was saying he wouldn't mind approving them, and then we can communicate with the organizations if they wish to, withdraw their request, given the recommendation regarding carryover requests.
All right, Will, was that a motion?
Sure, I will make the motion.
All right, I'll second it.
All right, I'll go ahead and do roll call vote. Iskin,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Galkin,
Yes.
Cruz, Lee, Joe, I don't know if you, it's up to you.
I think I should skip this one. So abstain. I abstain. I apologize.
Vanarelli?
Yes.
All right, motion passes by majority. Great. All right. Sorry, folks, that was a lot. I will say typically we haven't received a carryover request just given the history. It's a lot. So thank you for your patience. All right, Eric, I think we can move on.
Yeah, why don't you just go ahead with this next agenda item?
Sure. So I'm going to provide a quick update regarding the 2022 partnership grants, which, as I mentioned, will be will begin early next year. So just a few updates. Judicial Council at their September-October meeting approved an allocation award of 2580574 for 36 eligible projects. We're currently completing the administrative portion of the exam, so grantees are completing their budget confirmations and completing any other documents before the grant agreements are released. They're due in December, and then the grant will be distributed in January.
So can I just interrupt for a second for the new members, because your head can start to spin with all these different grants that we're in various cycles that we're dealing with today at the same time, a lot of balls in the air. What Christina is now talking about are grants that this committee or its predecessor, I guess, approved already last summer for 2022. So Christina is just giving us an update on those already approved grants. And then once we get through this update, we're going to move on to the next tranche of funding, which is some additional funding that the legislature has authorized for 2022. that we have to develop a process for, and that's what we'll be spending some time on. But Chris, just go ahead and update us on this before we get to that one.
Yeah, those were all the related updates. So we're, as I mentioned, we're just kind of closing this grant year out in preparation to debut early next year.
Okay, now on to the next cycle.
Yeah, so our next item is the PG 2.0 review process. I'll just give an overview of what Partnership Grants 2.0 is. So due to an unanticipated increase in EAF funding, we actually have an amount of about 3.88 million in available funding for partnership grants. So the parameters were discussed around the summertime and approved by Judicial Council in September, October. So here's just a quick overview. So all applicants applying for this funding opportunity would be subject to the general threshold eligibility requirements. The committee also discussed and was approved that will be utilizing the same scoring rubric that we did for 2022. And the applications will come as to 2 options. Option 1 would be for the 2022 current grantees who'd be able to apply for supplemental funding up to their original requested amount. Because it's supplemental funding, this grant period of the spend down period would be a shorter period of 9 months, April 1st to December 31, 2022. Option 2 is kind of the new application option that will be a much longer grant period of 21 months, April 1st to December 31st, 2023. And then just to note, we are recommending substantial grant award request of 75 to 300,000 as the kind of the range to help spend down the money. And then I think we noted possibly, not considering carryovers just given the time frame. To put it,
Christine, can you possibly just at a high level talk about what the threshold eligibility requirements are, just for the new committee members, so they know what we're talking about?
Sure, just a couple of elements for the threshold eligibility requirements. So this funding opportunity is only available to qualified legal services projects, QLSPs. The projects must be a joint project between the court as well as the QLSP. It must serve self-represented litigants as well. So those I believe there's one more, but it's escaping me. But it's kind of along those lines.
So these are basically just self-help kinds of clinics that operate in courthouses that deal with things like unlawful detainer, consumer credit rights, family law issues, domestic violence injunctions, and things like that, where people come in, they're representing themselves, and then they just get some advice to enable them to better perform in the courtroom.
All right, and I also wanted to present kind of the partnership grants timeline. PG 2.0, just for the new members, like that is an additional funding opportunity. The partnership grants are typically 1-year grants, and so there's not necessarily any overlap. PG 2.0 is kind of in the middle of between 2 grant cycles. So here on the screen is kind of a timeline. I think I have it through the end of the year, but this first slide is from November through March and what that would look like. As you can see, 2022, this is what I just talked about. We are just finishing the administrative end with the release of January 1st for that beginning of the grant period. PG 2.0 is where we're anticipating a lot of work to be happening in terms of administration or review, and then grantees completing applications, very compacted as well. And then November 2023 will resume that process in January when we release the RFP. Okay, and then just to point out for today's meeting, for PG 2.0, our goals is to confirm the application review process for PG 2.0, as well as discuss the scoring rubric for 2023, which again will begin that process will begin early next year as well.
The scoring rubric is also going to be used in this PG 2.0 as well, right?
And that's for Rubric, the committee discussed at the last meeting, I believe. And
Oh, so we already approved that for this?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
the committee agreed to just use the same rubric as the 2022 rubric, because 2.0 is kind of a somewhat of an extension of the funding or an expansion of the funding, and there was not time to make any significant changes because of the timing of everything.
Okay, sorry. Thank you.
Yeah. And then just to kind of close out this year too, from April 2022 to December 2022, that's kind of when the bulk of 2023 will happen in terms of application review, making funding recommendations. So that's kind of what our term year looks like, at least for the upcoming months. Any questions, or does anyone want to take a closer look at the dates or discuss? All right, so just to discuss a little bit of the PG 2.0 review process, as you can see, it's a very compacted schedule towards the end of the year and beginning next year. So here's a proposed process. Just to let you know some background on this. We also released our HP funding opportunity. So this proposed process you see on the screen is heavily based on that process. Eric, I believe, also serves on that committee and can kind of speak to how it's gone, because I think this is the process they went with.
Oh, and HP is Homelessness Prevention Fund.
Oh, thank you.
So the legislature, again, it was really a good year for these projects and for legal service organizations in general. The legislature approved a lot of money in a couple of different, to be allocated in a couple of different funding streams. One is for homelessness prevention, and that's being dealt with by another committee of this commission. And we just had a meeting last week to talk about the process for distributing the extra homelessness prevention monies. But the legislature also has allocated, as you can see, $3.8 million for these partnership grant projects. And so now we have to figure out what we're going to do with that money and how we're going to oversee the administration of those funds. And we're actually thinking about using a process that is similar to the process that we used for homelessness prevention, which will involve significant delegation to staff with some commission participation. But Christina, you can get into the details of that.
Okay, great. So option one, as I mentioned, it's requesting supplemental funding for the existing 2022 grantees. So with this, they're able to apply for funding up to the original requested amount. So for example, if a organization applied for a $100,000 grant and they were granted 75, they can apply up to 25,000. Just because it's kind of using the same project proposed, it's a very straightforward application. Kind of just, we have a few additional questions as to why they're seeking the funding, what kind of changes they anticipate with the increased funding, and then would need to submit a kind of revised budget as to that supplemental funding. The recommendation for this review process, just because it builds on what the committee had discussed and voted recommended last year, is that the staff reviews the supplemental application, but in consultation with one of the committee members. The thinking is that we can present the staff recommendation regarding all of the option one applicants at a January committee meeting.
How much money would be involved in this option one? Like if all of the projects that did not get their full requested amount now came back and requested the difference, how much money would that be out of this 3.8 million?
So option one, if all projects apply and are granted that other piece, the supplemental funding, it would be a smaller amount of about 500,000 for option one. And just to note, several projects were funded, kind of their full funding, so they wouldn't necessarily apply for this option. So I believe it's maybe in the span of about 30 projects who would be eligible if they would like to apply under option one. So that's a much smaller kind of world versus option 2, which we're hoping to garner like larger scope and complex and kind of more innovative projects. Okay, so before we go to option 2, I just wanted to see if there's any questions about the option 1 and that proposed review process.
So the idea is that the projects that want to seek this funding would submit their application. Staff would review it in conjunction with maybe one committee member, and come up with a recommendation that we would then bring back to this committee sometime early next year.
Mm-hmm.
That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is that we could have every committee member, we could split up all of the applications for option 1 and have every committee member look at them, and then we could have more meetings. Frankly, that seemed to be somewhat inefficient for this relatively small amount of money. So the recommendation is to do it the way that I just described. We would have one committee member volunteer to work with staff and come up with a recommendation to bring back to this committee. And that would involve at most $500,000 of the roughly of the 3.8 million. Any questions about that? Thoughts about?
Well, I'm pretty new to this, Eric, but that sounds like a good approach to me.
Yeah, we've reviewed all of these applications previously,
Yeah.
so at the minimum level of workload sounds excellent.
Okay, I'll talk about option 2, Eric, and then you can figure out how the committee feels. So option 2 is the new application option. As I mentioned, we're trying to encourage a larger range of funding, 75 to 300,000. Historically, the project range has been 20,000 to 120,000. So it's a very robust funding opportunity. So given the kind of compacted timeline that I just presented, and kind of considering the HP review process and what they're doing, we wanted to kind of propose this to the committee. So with option 2 review, we're proposing that all the committees review and score about 3 to 5 of the new applications and kind of calibrate that during the January meeting. And so the staff has the staff is able to figure out, how the committee would like the rubric applied, whether that be to certain areas or to look for certain things. And then staff review and score the remaining new applications, again, in consultation with about 1 to 2 committee members to raise any issues or themes or trends as we continue the process. And then all of the tentative funding recommendations would be discussed at a February committee meeting.
So again, just to put a little more flesh on this one, because this does track the process we used for the Homelessness Prevention Committee. So here we're getting applications for basically new programs or significant expansions to the program that they had applied for. I guess an organization could seek to make up the difference in between requested and granted amount for option 1, but they could separately apply on option 2 as well, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Or we could just have new projects apply.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, the idea is that we're going to get a bunch of applications for these, new projects or significant expansions of the current ones. And I don't know how many we'll get, maybe 30-ish, something like that. I'm not sure. Do you have an idea about how many may come in? Do we have any idea based on historical records or?
I mean, historically, we've received projects in the range of like 30 to 38, I think was one of the highest. So hopefully we would receive that amount of applications for PG 2.0.
So let's say we get that. So the old way of doing this, the way we've done it in the past, is we would take that 38, we would split them up amongst the committee. They would have their own separate review groups and calibration groups, and then we would get together and calibrate, and it would involve, again, a bunch of meetings. What we decided to do with homelessness prevention was to adopt a different approach, which I kind of like. I don't know whether you all like it. Instead of doing that, what we did there and what we propose to do here is that we'll just pick maybe 3 to 5 of the new applications. And we will all, as a committee, calibrate those 3 to 5 based on the rubric at a meeting to be set probably in early January. And based upon that group calibration, the staff, based on the input from that calibration, with the aid of maybe 1 or 2 of us, would then review the rest of them with that input in mind, and again, come up with a recommendation for scoring, which they would then bring back to this full committee for review. So it's that approach that we're recommending here, kind of a group calibration of 3 to 5, input to the staff, and then set the staff off on its own way to do its work with maybe 1 commissioner, 1 of us or 2, come back with a recommendation.
So Eric, can I ask a question about the scoring process? Is there like are there specific criteria that we would apply?
Yes, yeah, there's a rubric that,
Right.
yes, there is. There's a rubric that we're going to be discussing the rubric for the 2023 grant cycle, which is a little bit different from the one that we would apply to this one. We've tweaked the 2022 rubric a bit, but it's largely similar. So you'll get a feel for what the rubric is when we move on to discuss it. But just in general, we look at things like the effectiveness of court involvement, the impact of the project, how many people it anticipates serving, how well the project is administered, what they're saying about who's staffing it, who's administering it, the kinds of people, the levels of people, the levels of expertise, what plans they have for continuity, for getting funding, because these grants are intended to be like 5-ish years. So we like to see projects build in some plans for continuity when the grant runs out, what plans they have to evaluate success. So there are a bunch of these dimensions that we look at and score.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, because one issue that's leaping out to me is if we have different people scoring, how do we ensure they're applying the same criteria, right?
Well, that's the idea of the group calibration.
Right.
So we'll have the group calibration and we can talk about it. Because Joe, you may score something 80 and Will may score at 60, and we'll talk about why that is, and we'll try to come up with a consensus for we are unlikely to reach 100% consensus, but at least we'll get some input and hopefully reach a decent enough consensus so that the staff will have guidance.
Right.
And
that makes a lot of sense.
And the
Thank
staff itself has a lot of experience with this applying these rubrics, so they bring a lot of wisdom to bear as well.
Right. Great. Okay, that's very helpful. So thank you.
Yeah, I really like the idea of the staff taking on more. I think it makes sense because they have the expertise and just a lot of experience here. Where I wonder is when we went through the process last year, I think there was a robust discussion, at least in my team, and some disagreement. And I don't know that a calibration session would end that. So I think the trade-off is there would be a little less discussion on those items where there would be disagreement, where we've seen disagreement in the past, where I ranked something very low and staff ranked it high, and then we really dug into what's going on there and why. And some of that had to do with just definitions and really understanding the rubric. And so it was a learning exercise. But sometimes there was a substantive disagreement and we ended up averaging our scores. And to be honest, I'm not sure how I feel about the trade-off. Like I like it on one side, but it would be disappointing, I think, to lose some of that additional review. Even though it's time consuming, it is so time consuming, and we are in an abbreviated process here. I'd be interested what others people think.
I'll stay silent, let others if you want to weigh in. I have a thought, but anybody else have thoughts about that? I mean, I'll just say, yeah, Will, I mean, you make a good point. Sure, that there would, although I'm not sure there would be, well, first of all, we do propose the group calibration of 3 to 5. So we'll have a chance for a robust discussion, even under this proposal of 3 to 5 proposals as a whole group. If we do the evaluation the way we've done in the past, you know, you would still end up getting 3 to 5 applications. It's just that they would be part of a smaller group. And you'd actually have maybe in a way almost less of a discussion, because we'd have a subgroup of, you know, maybe you and one other commissioner discussing 3 to 5, and then we'd have another subgroup discussing another 3 to 5. So I'm not sure that process would necessarily result in a more enlightened decision.
I definitely won't claim it's more enlightened, but it is, they bring that expertise then to the bigger meeting, where when someone asks, why is this low or why is this high, there can be some discussion there. And I guess because of the abbreviated time frame, I'm inclined to go with this process, though I do feel it will result in overall less review and digging into the application. So maybe it's not worth it to discuss it past that. If everybody else feels like this is the process that makes sense for PG 2.0.
Oh, and I just want to underscore for you, Will, that staff will be reviewing, as staff traditionally does. Staff reviews the entire set, and it's multiple staff. It's a staff team that reviews the entire set. So there will be adequate review, I think. I think there's, and we will raise issues as appropriate. I think the valuable, what's valuable that the committee members will bring is that they'll help us with the calibration of these 3 to 5 applications, so that we know the direction that the committee wants us to use with the rubric. So
yeah, and that certainly makes sense. I mean, I think it's hard because staff, there can be a tendency when you work really close together to have groupthink, and when you get outsiders, like my team member Justice Murray, he had lots of insight into applications, and I thought it was invaluable.
Mhm.
However, overall, I'm not sure how much it changed the scoring, but it did bring a lot of questions. And then the follow-up from those questions, I think, really helped clarify what those programs were going to be, at least on the committee side, and hopefully with the organizations themselves. That was the value, I thought, that was really there. And maybe that could be replicated just by allowing committee members to ask questions on why staff scored certain things in a certain way.
of course,
So I think that makes sense. And I appreciate the response, Elizabeth.
So if we were to go this route, well, any more discussion about the idea, process? Do we need a resolution approving this?
I don't believe so. This is just regarding kind of like the administration, and the Partnership Grant Committee is already granted like authority to oversee the review process. So we're just kind of nailing down or figuring out what it would look like. So if kind of there's a consensus with this proposal, we'll move forward, because the parameters, those are the requirements, and that's already established. This is kind of like how we're going to be reviewing it. So no formal vote required.
So you went over the timeline before, but now in light of this discussion, it might be useful to just kind of reiterate a little bit. So the applications are coming in when, and then when would staff be doing the initial cut, and then when will we be back to this committee for its initial calibration of the 3 to 5?
Yeah, so here, this next slide here is just kind of what the PG 2.0 or the committee timeline would look like. Applications are going to be released next week and then due on December 17th. So the dates in red, they're still tentative, but just wanted to kind of put there for some placeholder. So from December 17th, the submission deadline maybe through the first few weeks of January, staff will confirm the threshold eligibility requirements for all of the applications. And then we'll kind of proceed with the option 1 application review. So we'll be hopefully in touch with a committee member if there's any questions regarding that batch of applications. And then also during that time frame, I think we're gonna have the committee members review and score the 3 to 5 option 2 applications. January 14, that's where we would bring the staff recommendations regarding option 1 and then have the kind of more robust discussion of option 2 of those 3 to 5 applications. And then staff will proceed with the option 2 application review from January 14 through February. And then hopefully around 3rd week or so of February, that's where we would finalize the PG 2.0 funding recommendations. Again, just to remind all the folks, April 1 is the start date for this grant. So we still need to build in time for commission approval or commission review and approval, judicial council approval, et cetera. So that's why we're trying to end it around February.
So we're not the final word.
We recommend the tentative funding allocations, but then that has to get signed off 2 more levels.
Okay.
Yeah.
By the way, did Judge Murray and Judge Jaskol, are you guys going to be, are they involved in the 3 to 5 calibration?
Yeah, I mean, they were involved in the review process last year, so we'd be anticipating like participation for that 3 to 5 application calibration, but hopefully much less intensive than the 2022 applications were, which I know were pretty intensive for the committee members with our review and calibration sessions.
Crystal,
Mm-hmm.
just to remind you, I am retiring in January, so I will not be involved in this process.
Congratulations.
Wow.
Rosemary.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm only 65, but that's the mandatory minimum that you have to achieve in order to get the full retirement. I don't know if you all know, I had a couple of strokes back in 2017. And so I decided right then and there that I was going to retire the minute I became eligible. So I'm retiring on my birthday in January.
Oh,
Wow.
Well deserved.
Congratulations. Oh, we'll miss you.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I'll miss you guys too, but I may be looking for something to do in my retirement. So I suppose it's possible I could come back or maybe land on a legal service providers board somewhere. Yeah.
Well, I guess Justice Murray, I don't know if you had any thoughts. I know you've gone through this review process and also the rubric last year. Any thoughts on the proposal for the PG 2.0 review process?
Honestly, Crystal, I have not looked at it very closely because I knew I wasn't going to be involved in it, and I've got a lot of stuff that I got to clear out before I retire. So to be honest, I'm just listening today. I did not review the things you guys are talking about. Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem.
I'm a short timer, lame ducker. So.
Well, let's see. Do we have a consensus to proceed along these lines?
I like it.
Yeah, I think we do.
So I understand, Christina, that you might be willing to help out on option 1. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Either anything you want me to do.
That would be great. I mean, I'm willing to do the consultation on the option 2 work. I don't know whether we need another person. Do you think you said 1 to 2? I mean, you think we need 2 on that one, or is 1 person with staff enough? I'm looking at you, Crystal.
Yeah. I mean, I think 1 is sufficient. I don't want to rob anyone of that opportunity if they'd like to have this, but I do want to remind folks we do have 2023 coming up as well. So there are lots of opportunities to participate in application review process. We want to be mindful of the time constraints and try and review this as efficiently and comprehensively within our time.
As long as we're able to ask questions or identify deficiencies on anything we see, I think this is fine. One more set of eyes on the rubrics. Great.
Sounds great. All right, well, so we'll go with option one. Option two, Crystal will be the person to work with staff on option one. I mean, unless somebody wants to object to that, I'll be the person on number two. And the whole group of us will be calibrating the 3 to 5 applications. And then, of course, we'll also participate when staff comes back with the recommendation on both of these options. So good. All right. So unless there are any further comments, let's move on.
Okay, so kind of going through the our current funding opportunities, today we're going to be discussing the proposed rubric for the 2023 partnership grants. I believe there was a memo posted in the meeting materials for this particular item. Just to kind of recap the current rubric and what that looks like so far, just here's kind of an abbreviated format. So there are eligibility requirements. That is not a scored section, just because all projects receiving this funding must meet the threshold eligibility requirements. So that's a yes or no, which staff does confirm beforehand. Selection criteria is a category with several subcategories with a total possible points of 80. Funding priority is given 20 points, and then an optional innovation section with the possible, I believe it's 10 points. Sorry about that, folks, 10 points for this section. So I know for 2022, that was the first year that we utilized a scoring rubric, and we did debrief on the process, both with the committee, and then we also sent a survey to the applicants who applied for 2022. Overall feedback was positive. I think there was some recommendations in terms of administration, such as having additional webinars to kind of help grantees learn more about the rubric and how to utilize them. And then a couple of other comments in terms of like definitions from the committee. So overall, the 2022 rubric seemed to be successful. One other update was after the 2022 review cycle kind of ended, we did have the rules committee meeting around August. So the rules committee looked at the topic of the RFP competitive discretionary grants and that process for review. And the rules committee recommendation, which is still pending commission approval, is that all competitive discretionary grants utilize a rubric and had some proposed changes such as streamlined definitions. So in consideration of the kind of positive feedback for the 2022 rubric, as well as the pending recommendations from the rules committee, the major change that staff is recommending is that we streamline the definitions of the rubric in line with the rules committee recommendations. Just wanted to mention Christina Vanaroli served on kind of the working group for the rules committee, just to also give the partnership grant perspective, because we had utilized the rubric in 2022. All right.
Joe, I don't know if you may have been trying to log on while we went through the eligibility requirements, but essentially the project has to be a qualified legal service project, and it has to be a self-help kind of project at the courthouse for self-represented litigants, and there are some others, but that's the broad strokes. And then I guess we're not going through the whole rubric. You're just going to highlight changes now. Is that what you're doing, Krista?
Yeah. So the proposed change for 2023 is really just to kind of streamline the definitions in line with what the rules committee had recommended. Just for reference, the working group worked really hard, and we had looked at all of the definitions and selection criteria across all of the state-based discretionary grants, including the homelessness prevention, bank grants, partnership grants, et cetera, to come up with these streamlined definitions with the thought that we can bring some uniformity and conformity in the process, so grantees know what to expect. If they see a certain category, they'll know to expect kind of a very similar or kind of the same definition across that, so it's interpreted similarly.
But the whole rubric itself, you distributed that as one of the items in the memo for this meeting.
So I had attached the 2022 request for proposal, so that had the full 2022 rubric. So for discussion, the proposed change, I guess, as I mentioned, will just be the definitions for these for these project categories or these selection criteria categories.
So if you wanted to see the full rubric, you would go into the materials that you distributed or that are on the State Bar website for this meeting.
Yes, yes.
And it's the memo related to, is it this item?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
2023 rubric. So on the screen here is the 2022 definition that was used for the rubric, and on like the blue squares here, this is what the definition proposed change would look like. Again, in line with the Rules Committee's recommendations to streamline definitions. So there were 4 categories. So project impact, administration, and then I'll show this quickly, continuity, planning, and evaluation. Again, these were categories that were seen throughout all of the State Bar's competitive discretionary grants. And so the plan is to kind of use these definitions moving forward, and we can maybe do so beginning in the 2023 grants administration year.
Can you go back to the project impact definition? So I think the proposed definition to me is fine, but I've mentioned to Crystal, she's sick of hearing it, but I'll mention to the committee, one of my frustrations with the application has been that the chart that we include for the projects to indicate how many people they will serve, I mean, I just find confusing, and I've kind of been constantly haranguing that I think that needs to change so we can have a clear sense for how many people or families the project intends or hopes they can serve, and how many with each kind of service. Right now, the way the chart exists to me is numbers. There's all kinds of overlapping numbers. I don't have a clear sense for how many people are being served. So I would really strongly recommend that we modify that.
And so Eric's feedback, just to kind of respond, like that's in relation to the application itself. And so like we can make those adjustments. It wouldn't necessarily impact the scoring rubric. So I think staff we have some time to kind of revisit the application and adjust the questions just so they're more responsive, and will be helpful in evaluating the appropriate rubric score when that comes. So yeah, thank you, Eric.
I think the definition changes don't seem really that huge. So those look fine. I did have a kind of a question on why, and I think I mentioned this previously, why we want to maintain one rubric for all of the applications when really there's 2 separate pots here. There are the returning applicants and the actual new applicants. And so we evaluate them essentially as if they're all new, where they have to fill out the same stuff that they filled out previously. And then the next year and the next year and the next year, it's this de novo review of their program, when my understanding is we're usually committing to 5 years, and except under exceptional circumstances, we are going to fund them, maybe at a reduced amount, but we're going to fund them. And it seems to me using the same exact rubric for both situations leaves out the opportunity to really focus in on whether they've met their commitments based on their evaluations. So, and sort of waste everybody's time. We've already said this program's good. One committee has said this program's good. We've approved it. We've done that review for everything they've set out. And usually then what I see in the outside world is we look at, okay, have they met their commitments? Have they done what they set out to do? and met those commitments, and then we evaluate and consider based on whether that has happened. And so it would seem to me that one rubric doesn't fit both those circumstances well, and so you end up with not doing that evaluation piece as well as I think could be possible. And when you think of the overall mission of we want to make sure that the PG funds are going to help the indigent, and that those funds are being spent effectively, it seems like after that first year, we would really want to look at, okay, how did it go? And then focus our rubric on that question. How did it go? Did you do it? And not focus it on reviewing the questions that we've already answered. So I had some curiosity there, and I was hoping to get some discussion going.
Yeah, so Eric, just wanted to, so you were talking about the evaluation piece too, because I think, is that the portion you were talking about? Or sorry, I'm not Eric, Will.
Oh, I'm talking about like bigger picture, I think, than just a piece, because I know that, right, we've added a line, returning organizations applying for the funding opportunity also need to address prior evaluation outcomes and metrics, which is great, but it seems to me that that should be the whole thing for returning organizations. We should be saying, address the prior evaluation outcomes and metrics. I don't need to review your whole program proposal again unless there are serious changes. Obviously, that's the exception. I just want to know, how'd you do? Did you do well? Did you meet your outcomes and metrics?
Well, I think you need to look at both, because I mean, you know, the categories, you know, like continuity planning, administration, which is on the prior slide, like those are also equally important, in my opinion, to review for a returning applicant. And project impact may shift depending on what the project has learned in their year of operation. And so I think on the staff side, we think that these categories are relevant for both new and returning applications. And we, you know, as the Rules Committee discussed, they did try to add some lines throughout to address the returning applicant situation. But I think I don't think the Rules Committee discussed two separate applications and rubrics for
Also,
this.
I think, Will, I think you're making some assumptions about this program, or there's some assumptions built into what you just said that I think are not quite right. Unlike IALTO, which has some minimum requirements, and if you meet them, you know, you get a piece of the funding allocated to the county. The PG partnership grant opportunity is a competitive grant that is judged every year de novo, right? So just because an organization merited funding, let's say in 2021, in 2022, you might have a different set of projects that would provide different benefits and different advantages, and that we might find even though we funded somebody in 2021 at a certain level, we might find that the projects in 2022, the new ones, are just a lot better, for example. And maybe we want to provide more funding to them. So I do think we have to look at, isn't that right, Elizabeth? That it's a competitive opportunity that is judged each year.
Yeah.
It's a race that we run each year, basically. It's a new race. So, you know, you don't have a guaranteed 5-year funding once you get approved.
I guess that was not the impression I was given in the past two funding rounds. It felt like there was a really heavy funding priority for returning programs. If you're a returning program, you got a lot of extra points and consideration, and to cut off a program before the 5 years is up, I think is unheard of. It may have happened, but the assumption I make, I think you're right, I do make that assumption, but I also am making it based on the past conversations where the idea of ending a program before the 5 years or substantially reducing it seemed unheard of. And to really would be really harmful to the programs and their expectation that they would be getting, if not guarantee of funds, a strong priority as we meted out the funding in that contest.
I never felt that way at all.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's so interesting.
Jason has a comment.
Yeah, I don't want to get too much into hypotheticals about gamesmanship, but if we're just evaluating on outcomes, right? And so you're year 2 through hypothetical year 5, then, if I'm clever about how I'm structuring my program, I frame my project impact administration and focus on hitting those marks in my initial proposal. And then in subsequent re-ups, I cut my staffing focus and my project focus on those to dedicate funds elsewhere where I want to put them, but may have changed the award mentality of the commission and otherwise.
So can you just explain that a little bit
I was
further?
gonna say, you're smart.
Follow. Yeah, go. I'm not sure I totally follow what that would result.
So I mean, imagine 2 hypothetical scenarios, right? So when I'm putting forward a proposal as a qualified legal service provider, I'm trying to hit these targets and convince the commission and otherwise that my project is worth supporting because I am able to, put forward a cohesive plan, project and framework of project impact administration, evaluation, and otherwise. I'm hitting all the criteria. If your subsequent years for that project, right, after the initial award, are only evaluated on their evaluation, the outcome, then you're assuming that the other areas of your scoring criteria remain consistent, but that's not actually necessarily true. I could still deviate from my initial, so long as I'm providing, the output consistent with what got me the first award. So you're assuming consistency where you lack a basis to do so.
I don't. If my remarks were interpreted that way, I don't think that was what I meant. I think substantive changes like that, or changing your staffing, or any piece of this, would be worthy of reevaluation if you change your program. I think the problem that my idea of 2 separate rubrics would try to address, and maybe there is a better way here, is really making sure that we look at the results for what they claim. And it feels like our primary process, at least in the past, has been the application and the rubric, and the evaluations are just a small piece. I think, what is it, 5 points? I'm not sure. 5 points, where if I can put together a cohesive application using everything I've already submitted, well, 90% of the application is that, and a really small portion is the evaluation piece, which doesn't even show up in the application. We have to go separately pull the metrics that have been submitted by the organization and then review them without the benefit of a rubric or other method of just being consistent in how we review those evaluations, and incorporate them in our funding decisions. So I guess to Eric's point, I want to run the contest, and if there have been significant changes, that's important, but I would put way more weight for returning programs on actual performance.
I mean, I think I would still apply the same rubric to everybody, but I think you make what I'm hearing is a good point, that maybe we should impact evaluations of performance more directly into the project impact dimension, to the extent that there is data on outcomes, maybe we should specifically direct the evaluators to look at that at that outcome data as part of our evaluation of project impact. I think you're right. I think we don't do enough of that. I completely agree with that. So I think that's a good point, but I still think we need to apply the same rubric to everybody. To the extent we have outcome data, we should definitely look at it. And we should do it more systematically than we do it now. I agree with that. But I still think we should apply the same rubric. We have to apply this. I think we have to apply the same rubric to everybody.
I guess in thinking that through, what you described, applying more of the metrics systemically, the outcome I came to was, well, eventually it's 2 different rubrics. But if it can be accomplished in the same rubric, then that's fantastic. I don't know how to do that, and I guess I don't know what the motion would be or the directive to staff for making that change so that we more meaningfully incorporate those outcomes and metrics.
I know that, oh, sorry, Crystal.
Yeah, I just wanted to, so Eric's feedback earlier was about the project impact category. And I think in relation to that, we can address and try to get more clear information in the application itself through making some revisions and like just making the metrics a little bit more clear in the application. And again, this would be outside of the rubric that gets approved in concept, but we can dig a little bit deeper in terms of requesting that specific information within the application. Elizabeth, go ahead.
And I would add that I know last year we provided some samples to the committee on what exceeds, what meets, what needs improvement. I can't remember if those are the exact categories, but we gave some examples. And so I think given Will's feedback, we can probably add in some guidance there related to how to look at the evaluations and what might how to apply the rubric to that.
It seems to me that, I mean, to Will's point, there's probably some degree of prior performance consideration going on subsequent review anyway. And maybe for transparency purposes, I wouldn't necessarily mind a different, criteria or weight for that and highlighting it somewhere, like we're going to evaluate your project impact and administration, and we're going to weight that in consideration of your prior performance. If you've previously been awarded, and this is a continuation of an existing award, because I think that's implicit in what's already happening most likely.
Yeah.
Right. So it's good to be transparent that like, hey, look, we're considering this stuff. You don't get to just, get clean slate as if we didn't look at your past performance at all. I mean, I think if we're doing that, then it's good to put it on there and then have some internalized mechanism for how we're applying that weight.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
I think what I did was essentially that. I did look at the prior evaluation, the work that they had done through the previous year in their evaluations and factored that into what I recommended on the rubric. I don't remember if I factored it in under project impact or some other criteria, but it was definitely part of my analysis. I think, what Eric said earlier and what Will said are both are basically are happening at the same time. It's a new race, but the people who've been in the race have additional things to show us as it relates to the next race every year. And so as a practical matter, I think I factored it in certainly. And my guess is the providers realize that we're factoring that in. If a program is floundering and they're not producing, our rating of them relative to the other programs in the race that year is impacted by their previous performance, and they must know that. But so I don't think what Eric and Will said are that different. Actually, I think both are happening. And I don't know, Christina, is that kind of how you looked at
I
your
completely agree.
evaluations?
I
Okay.
completely agree. I think everybody is factoring it in, and Jason's comments make me think, well, is there a way we can make it more transparent? And we should maybe look at that so that it's less apparently subjective.
Maybe we should, but I don't think it's a surprise to the providers that their past performance is being considered relative to each new application they make every year throughout that, say, 5-year period.
Well, I will say that it's kind of cumbersome to actually extract the evaluations when we're going.
Yeah, no, there's
Yeah.
no question about that. And that's always been the case. And then a couple of years we didn't get the evaluations right away. I'm like, where are the evaluations? And they got provided. This might be a little bit more ancient history in terms of years ago when that happened. But the point is, it's not Eric's making is that all that information is not in one place for us to look at. You have to toggle back and forth between the new application and the evaluation from the previous year.
And then Justice Murray, just to address that, so I think that was one of the feedback given when we debriefed. I think on the back end, staff is trying to find a way to have it all kind of in the application as either like a reference up a document, whether that be a PDF of the most previously submitted evaluation, just so it's all together. Because that makes sense that you'd want to see it all together within one application instead of doing the toggle. So
Right.
we're trying to see if that's possible, and hopefully it will be for 2023.
Yeah, and I do agree with what Eric said earlier, by the way, about the numbers they're reporting. It's hard to decipher if they say they have 300 people that they provided clinical services to, and then they say they have 300 people they provided face-to-face services to. I'm assuming they're the same 300 people, but you can't really tell from one application to another what exactly they're telling us they are planning to serve and have served.
I really appreciate that feedback, Justice Murray, and that it was included. I think the transparency is what I would point to. If we're going to include it in Project Impact or anywhere else, that we are looking also at their evaluations and metrics. How do we make that explicit to them that that is included, as opposed to the current rubric, which only has that small section for evaluation? And I might look at the grant application and think, oh, this is the only piece where my evaluations and metrics are included, not these other places. Because I read continuity planning and administration as perspective, or project impact really is perspective. This is what we want to do. And do I think that plan makes sense? And is it good? And I don't think I applied the past performance to that piece on the rubric. When I think it's an excellent idea where that's where it probably fits really well, project impact.
You know what?
You look at your evaluation.
If you go back to project impact, I mean, the second sentence there where it says outcomes may include blah, 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 blah. You could add to that at the risk of constructing a compound sentence, an overly long sentence, but here's the idea. You could say, and will be measured by, or it will be measured in part by, actual performance in past periods as demonstrated on the project evaluations or something like that. In other words, to expressly incorporate it there into the definition. I would say, yeah.
Eric, could you repeat your suggested edit?
Why don't you just say previous performance will be considered or something like that, or previous performance as reflected in prior year evaluations.
Previous, yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, I only looked at the previous year, not previous year's evaluation. So I don't know that we had access to those. If we did, I didn't want to put that much work into it.
think we do have access to it.
Yeah, you're probably right on the Smart
Yeah.
Simple, but
On Smart Simple, commissioners have access to.
yeah, I didn't drill down that far.
I guess I would ask to the other commissioners, what's the appropriate weight to be given to to the last year's evaluations and the metrics there? Because adding it to project impact seems to make sense. Or is it something that's throughout the application, we can look at past performance and say, well, your administration didn't seem to measure up based on these outcomes. I'm not sure what's best.
I would add it as a separate metric that's allowed to go negative. So 0 is, they get nothing better, nothing worse. They get a negative or a positive. That way it won't
I like the way you
skew.
think.
It won't skew right to the new ones.
So on your sentence there, it's not quite grammatical as it's framed now. So
Yeah, go ahead.
either I would say, and will be measured by previous performance, or may be measured by previous performance, or we could just do a separate sentence, previous performance as reflected will be considered. I mean, either.
Yeah, let's new sentence. Yeah. Yeah.
To Will's question, I would tend to apply it globally, whether it's a separate metric or not. But
Yeah.
in contemplating how I would evaluate someone, like if their project impact said that they would have certain results and they came up short, when I'm reviewing their new project impact proposal and that maybe they hit 80%, well, I'm going to contemplate that their estimates may be similarly off, unless they explain why it's different, right, and are able to address it. And I think the same might be true for any of the categories, based on what they said they were going to do versus what happened.
Yeah, that's why I said I don't remember right now without looking at the notes I took last year or earlier this year, what category I factored the previous performance in on, and it might have been more a global overview. Maybe I did think about that relative to one of the other categories like administration or something like that. I just don't know. I just think that it seems implicit in a grant process, if you are applying from one year to another, that the entity awarding the grant is going to consider what you've done, right? It's like the teachers used to say, show me your work, right? That's going to be part of the mix. I think making that clear from a transparency perspective is fine, but I honestly I don't know why any provider would think we weren't considering their previous work.
I totally agree, Justice Murray. I think part of my confusion, and it may just be me that looked at it this way, is so much of the rubric is written prospectively. Even the evaluations section
That's
is
true.
A successful proposal will incorporate meaningful evaluations and metrics that, and it's all in the future looking, not looking retrospectively. So however we could improve that transparency, and maybe this is something that staff could take and modify the rubrics so that it does more globally incorporate that, and maybe that would be the appropriate course of action, or something else that I haven't thought of. I'm open to it.
So,
go
go ahead, Elizabeth.
Oh, I didn't see your back. Sorry, Crystal. So just given the timing, we do need to, I think we do need to have the commission approve this rubric at their November 17th meeting. So if the committee wants to, give staff the authority to tinker with the language per the discussion, we can do that and present it to the commission, but this committee wouldn't have the opportunity to meet and discuss it again.
This is Joe. I'm fine with that. I like the idea of being transparent. I think Justice Murray's right that anybody ought to know that, but it doesn't hurt to say it and remind folks. And I think we could simplify the last sentence and just say prior year's performance will also be considered. All right. Previous performances reflected in prior years is kind of from the Department of Redundancy Department.
Yeah.
I had a, oh, sorry, thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
Prior years. I think I just had a question too. So the rubric is presented in part with the larger RFP, the request for proposal document. Another option would be to, instead of having this like within the rubric, it kind of be mentioned in the body of the RFP and just saying, you know, as a note for returning projects or projects seeking continued funding, this consideration will be considered across the rubric instead of explicitly putting it in the definitions. I just did want to, yeah.
I really like that idea. That, I guess sort of the hesitancy I had in putting it in the rubric and saying it's implicit is that when you plug it in one place, then it makes it look like that doesn't matter other places as it relates to the application. So I like the idea of setting that out separately from the rubric and just highlighting the fact that, of course, we're going to be considering what you've done in the past.
That could work, but I just want to hope that it doesn't get lost if it isn't embedded somewhere clearly. So we could maybe do what you just said, but let me ask you this. In the application itself, are they asked to address evaluations, prior year evaluations?
No.
I mean, why don't
we currently just ask for methodologies, but I think, as I mentioned, like in the application, there is flexibility in terms of kind of building out those sections a little bit more. So they can report on kind of how it's going and why they're maybe not on track to meet the needs, just things like that to provide a little bit more context in terms of how the administration is going for like the current grant.
Yeah, I think I would suggest maybe incorporating it generally into the rubric as Judge Murray suggests, but let's tinker with the application to make them expressly address it.
That would make our review a lot easier, for sure. Assuming we got the information that we think is necessary.
I think that all makes sense. I think tinkering with it might be useful because the way the rubric is currently written prospectively, if a reviewing committee member or a reviewing organization looks at it, they might think it's still just looking into the future and not feel compelled to address the past. And I think I'm fine if staff wanted to take that and make modifications to properly express that it's not just future looking. We will also, for returning organizations, be looking at past performance. And I think that is pretty easy. I don't know. What does everybody think here?
And then just to note, like after the release of this RFP, we typically will have a webinar for potential applicants. So again, in addition to being kind of included in the general RFP, it's another point we can emphasize during the webinar for those interested, as well as any supporting document. So I just wanted to, because these definitions were approved by the Rules Committee, and it does seem like something more global in terms of the approach of how the committee intends to use it and considering past performance, maybe a suggestion would be kind of take that out of the actual rubric and kind of emphasize it in terms of how to be applied for continuing projects.
Yeah.
I guess I'm on Eric's side on this one, though. I lose track of the overall. And when I'm down in the weeds looking at the rubric row by row, I'm going, okay, this is what it says. And how do we keep from losing that evaluation piece? Because if we just say it at the beginning, I think it is, and we emphasize it this year, going forward, I would like to be able to look at it and say, oh, okay, yeah, I need to also look at past performance on this item without losing it somewhere up at the top.
So I'm hearing you want the line that's been added to the blue side of the square here, prior years performance, you want to keep that. Is that what I'm hearing?
I'm fine with keeping the previous definition. I think what you were hearing is throughout the rubric, how do we make it clear that it is retrospective and prospective going into the future?
Yeah,
and I made the suggestion earlier that we provide guidance to committee members and staff on, you know, examples of what exceeds expectations or meets expectations. Could we put it there, and would that be a place that would remind you to do that, to be both forward-looking and backward-looking?
We also need, the guidance also needs to go to the projects too, obviously, right?
Right,
Not
and we
just-
can put that in the RFP.
And then
But the-
also, yeah, and then also to add to the app, to tinker with the applications,
Yes.
make them.
I guess that makes a lot of sense to me if it weren't contradicted by the actual rubric, which is
I
still
don't
written.
think the rubric contradicts that.
I don't either. I don't think it contradicts it.
I think if you
I
put it
that's
in
where
the,
I'm a little bit confused. I don't think the rubric contradicts that.
I
Oh,
think if you
so-
put it in the RFP, it's like as an overarching global factor for them to, you know,
Mhm.
both know is going to be considered, but also have the opportunity to address, you know, you're setting up the context appropriately.
Yeah.
And and then we just need to know in evaluating that we're going to consider it.
I think it's clear that we are considering it in both of those, the last sentence of both of those.
Right.
If I may respond to Elizabeth just briefly, just even on the evaluation piece in the rubric, it speaks to demonstrate how the project's planned goals will be achieved. And so it's only forward.
So that's the, I'm sorry to interrupt you all, but that's the 2022 definition, and we're proposing to change it to the 2023 definition on the blue side of the square. And
I'm sorry, I was looking at the memo that was sent out for 2023.
Are you, can you look at the screen?
I'm glad to. So this block will be replacing the.
The blue block will be replacing the gray block. That is what staff's recommending.
Okay, I guess I'm not sure why the memo doesn't reflect this piece. This, okay. Sorry, let me catch up. So sorry. And appreciate the clarification.
Yeah, so I thought that definition was on page 5 of the memo. So it's like are being achieved. That's one of the tenses that got changed, and it's a little bit more detailed in the definition. So,
So Will, this is,
Yes.
you know, there are more words to this. This is forward looking, but I guess what we're proposing is that to incorporate the notion of telling us about past performance, which is your idea and the idea of many of us, we're gonna modify the RFP generally to make that clear. Number one, we're gonna include that in the webinar. And we're also going to modify the application itself to require the project to specifically address their prior outcomes, their past outcomes. To me, I think that works. I don't think we need to tweak this further.
Certainly. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think I was just looking too far into the memo on page 13. That was where I was
the
referencing.
attachment.
So that's where I got confused. Sorry for the confusion, but I agree that the recommend changes will be really helpful in improving transparency so programs know that they have to address it. And if we can include it in the application, especially that it gets there so that we're looking at it, I would really appreciate that change so that we have a follow through the whole process. And it's very clear. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I had to step away for a moment for a quick comfort break. Did you move that concept we've been talking about to the evaluations category?
No, what we did was that I think we adopted your thought of just putting it into the rubric.
Okay. Putting it into
the general RFP.
the general RFP, yeah.
Yeah, the general RFP, sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so these definitions, they can go ahead and move forward. I'll have the recommendation just on the screen. I know we're being cognizant of the time. So the memo on page 5, 4 and 5 does have those updated definitions with the same point allocation. So this is the recommendation, staff recommendation for the committee to approve that or to recommend them for approval at the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission meeting on November 17.
So moved.
Here a second. Okay, Christina, thank you. All right, I'll go ahead and do roll call. Iskin,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Gelkin,
Yes.
Cruz, Lee.
My first vote is a yes.
Vanarelli.
Yes.
All right, motion passes unanimously. And then we just had a few minutes, and this should be very quick too, as to our last agenda item, update regarding partnership grants evaluations. Just wanted to inform the committee in light of the updates to the State Budget Act, which is requiring specific reporting requirements regarding EAF funding. We're still working with Judicial Council regarding what those updates will look like, but the main takeaway that will potentially impact partnership grants is that there will be a mid-year as well as a final year reporting requirement for the partnership grant activities. So more to come. I just wanted to let you all know that that's something kind of coming in the near future, and that would be impacting, potentially the 2023 application review.
Who's actually doing that reporting? Is that us or is that the grantees?
Grantees. So it's more of it. This is more of an informational point, but they'll be adjusting the EF evaluations, and then we'll be looking a little bit closer with the partnership grants, and I'll go over with that through with the committee maybe at our next meeting or the next one after that once we get a better sense. But just wanted to share that.
And to be clear, the grantees will report to us, and then we will aggregate the data and report out to you all.
Yes.
So just
Thank you. And then we will report to the Department of Finance. So.
exactly. And yeah, there's lots of reporting going on by various parties.
All right, so that was all the update for that item, Eric.
Okay. Wow, that brings us to the end of our journey. Unless there are others that wish to extend it.
I have a client call in 5 minutes, so I don't.
Okay. Well, I guess if there's nothing further, we'll wish everybody a good weekend, and thanks to staff for all your hard work in preparing for this meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you,
This is
everybody.
if I can say so, since it's my first meeting, it's really terrific to see such a healthy and how to put it, interaction between the staff and the members of this committee. It's obvious that the staff are bearing a very heavy load or a very heavy portion of the workload, but doing so in a way that is efficient and involves everybody. And I've been on a bunch of different committees in my lifetime, and it doesn't always flow so smoothly. And I just want to salute the staff in particular. For the role.
Well, thank you. That's nice to hear. Thank you.
The chairman's okay too. He's
It's all looks. It's all looks.
I'd forgotten what a fantastic radio voice he has. I think, Eric, you do have another career if you ever want to pursue it. All right, it's nice.
Everybody have a good weekend, everybody.
All right,
Thank
nice
you.
seeing you all.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks.